Welcome to Tanakh Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live from Kingsland, Texas, USA, with another episode of Torah Talk Weekly Parsha. This week we are doing, hanging up on a scam phone call at the moment, we are doing Parshat Nitzavim, which is going to be very interesting. Sorry, I took my eyes off the screen for just a moment there. Rabbi, welcome back. It's always a pleasure. Oh,
William Teitze.
Teitze. Cool. And I had it wrong. So people on Facebook, Facebook world, and even in the YouTube comment section, they saw me post it for Nitzavim, and I'm jumping ahead of schedule. That's 29. We're on 21. Thank you for catching me on that. So, being said, I have always wondered what it meant. And I'm not looking at. I should pull it up. Lexi, let me do that. You know where it talks about let her hair, hair grow wild and her pair of her nails. That a lot of people see that as how she should be cutting her nails off. But in my understanding of it was like when you let things go wild and you're just like a wild animal, you let things grow like just out of control. And so I've always seen that as the whole having long painted fingernails is kind of like a thing of today. It's not a thing of biblical times. And so for the whole idea is to make her look repulsive. If it was acceptable for them back then, everybody kept their nails clean because they functioned. There wasn't no fashion shows. They were living in the wilderness and doing things and washing dishes and doing all this other stuff and shearing the sheep or whatever the case may be. Nails would certainly not only not be practical, but would certainly get in the way. So I've always been curious about that paring the nails thing. So maybe you can comment on that. There's more curiosities I have about the Parsha, and I'll reflect on that as we come into it, because I'm going off of last year's memory. So as far as that goes, so.
But this is what bothers you, William, the nails?
Yeah, it's weird because it's like what bothers me because I've seen or I've heard people, I don't know who they were, teach on it, and I'm like, that doesn't make any sense though. And so I need to resolve this in my mind, so I can finally put it to rest.
That's an easy one.
Okay.
You made it easy. Now, first, I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
The title that comes up on my notifications when you broadcast the videos, members only live stream.
Oh, I'm glad you said that. Hold on just a minute. Ooh, I'm glad you said that. That's one thing I forgot to change. All right, let's do this right here. I'm going to go. Where's my live feed at? Oh, here we go. 1 second. Yeah, thank you for catching that. It automatically sets that, and I have to go in and change it every time, which is really not fun. Manage videos.
So does that mean that not everyone can see us now?
Just the members right now. Hang on just a second. I'll fix that. So let's go here. I'm going to go live. I should be a member of my own channel. I can't even see my own video. Let me click the go live button and see what happens. We're already live. Okay. I'm going to say hi there. Okay, now that I'm in, I can edit it and switch it to public. Yep, it sure is. It's set the members. Thank you for saying that. Public. Done.
And will that change in real time? How does
yes,
that work?
it changes it. For many of you out there in YouTube land, you're just now tuning in because I had it set to members only, and it was supposed to be set to public. So you didn't get the first part of the conversation. So first part of the conversation was this Parshat Teitze. The very first part it talks about is about if you go to war and if a man sees a woman and wants to, he can't just have her. He's got to take her home and let her sit. I used to describe it this way: sit and rot in the corner of his room, in the corner of a room, for a month or however 30 days or however long it is. And then if you still find her desirable while she's repulsive, then you can go ahead and marry her, right? And so the question I have for Rabbi was the part about she let her hair grow and her pair her nails or her nails. Forget the term that's used there. Could you tell me what that term is? I'm going to look it up right now.
The term for what?
For the nails part, I was having an issue with.
I mean, in Hebrew, it says ve'asisa es tziporneha, or ve'asta et tziporneha, which literally just means, and she will do her nails. That's the literal translation.
Do, really? Wow. See, why would she do her nails and not do her hair? That's what I don't understand. Okay, you guys, Rabbi is having bad weather, so he's going to have an issue staying connected. Chapter 20. So he is currently disconnected. I'm going to sit tight with you, though. And I think it's actually 21, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, 21:10. Okay, cool. Let me go back there. So y'all sit tight. We'll let him reconnect. He'll be buzzing me in just a moment. Okay, 21:10. So if you go out to war against your enemies, and the Lord your God will deliver him into your hands and take captives, and you see among scattered a beautiful woman and you desire, you may take her for yourself as a wife. You shall bring her into your home. She shall shave her head and let her nails grow. Oh, see, that makes sense to me. But the teaching I always heard was she's supposed to cut her nails. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. So anyway, I should have looked it up on Chabad.org. And all right, let me try to call him real fast. Meanwhile, I'm glad you all are joining in. And again, I apologize y'all missed the first entry because I had it set to members only. It does that by default. Okay, I'm having trouble connecting with him again. Okay, so... Oh, hello, John. Welcome. Cannoli Queen. Oh, cool. Wow, you're freshly out of Christianity. I was just curious why Jewish women cover their hair. If you could briefly explain that. Thank you. It's about modesty, really. There's a lot into it, Cannoli Queen. But it's really about modesty. I mean, hair is one of the most sensual parts, visually sensual parts of. I mean, if you see anybody who's going out, the first thing they do is they put on makeup and they really make their hair as beautiful as possible, and it's a really eye catcher. So that's the simple answer for that. Okay, so I don't know that Rabbi is going to be back. So here's what I'm going to do. Y'all don't hang up. I'm going to do something different here. Let's see. Okay. No worries. 1 second. Rabbi's messaging me right now. I'll say next week. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I am going to do a screen share because the whole point is I want to have something ready every week for the coming up weekend, for the coming up Shabbat, weekly Parsha. So during that Shabbat, you can actually learn something about the correct Parsha that's being learned by Jews around the world. And for me, that's very important. So what I'm going to do is I am going to, if I've got one, that is, Teitze. Now I'm supposed to be searching my own channel. Give me 1 second, guys, if you don't mind. Your channel. Let me go to Manage Videos. And now let me go to Search My Channel. You know what? I actually don't have one. Holy cow! I've got two or more of other ones, but I don't actually have a Teitze prepared from last year. I had one for Nitzavim as a backup plan, but I've got two of them actually from 2015 and 2016, but I don't have one of this one, so we're gonna have to fix that. That is okay. So let me see what Rabbi's saying here. I can try this. Okay. Go for it. He's gonna try a hotspot somewhere. Go for it. But good to see everybody out there. And so here we go. I'm just going to read a few chat there. Very good to say hi. Terry Tanner, Rev Robbins, good to see you again. All right, time for karaoke. Yeah, did you see my other world? Is that what? Hi, Andrea. Is that where you're saying that? Okay, give him just a minute. We're going to try to reconnect with him. And meanwhile, at the Batmobile, there's 23 of you here. Hello, 23, and me. All right, let's see. There we go. Let's try this. Here we go. All right, we're going to try to get you again. And this is why it's good to have editing opportunities in posts.
Okay, you sound very choppy to me. Does that mean I sound very choppy to you?
It means that you can intermittently, but right now you sound fine.
Okay, so I'm using my cell phone to give my computer internet right now.
Okay. And so what I'll do is I'll clarify my question to you originally. Is I went to Chabad.org and it actually
cut out.
It actually
hear you now.
Oh, you can't hear me? Yeah, actually you did freeze. Yeah, it's freezing intermittently.
Poor connection.
Okay, and you said you're having bad weather. Is that the case?
Yeah, We have thunderstorms out here.
Gotcha. That's the issue. That's the issue. Okay, we could try to go on. You did freeze a second ago, but maybe once we get rolling, it might go uninterrupted. Let's see how that plays out. But just let you know, I went to say again.
Said I'm so sorry for the interruptions.
Not your problem. It's not your cause, not your anything. So I'm just glad that you're here, and we'll see if we can make it work. So on Deuteronomy 21, on verse 12, I looked at Chabad.org, and their translation says it the way it kind of makes sense to me. It says that she shall shave her head and let her nails grow. That's what makes sense. But I think what happened was, I think when I first heard it was in the Christian, maybe in the Christian church, and they said, no, you're supposed to cut her nails so she doesn't look pretty. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. What's up? Everything else has to grow, and you're going to cut her nails? Why? You want her to look wild and ugly, wild like an old bear, you know.
So in all fairness, so Chabad.org, I assume they have a good translation, because I think their translation is based on the commentary of Rashi, who's the most classic commentator on the Torah, on the Tanakh, on the Talmud, etc. And Rashi does understand this word that I was describing before, that it says that ve'asisa es tzipornea, ve'asta et tzipornea, she will do her nails. Doesn't mean a manicure. Rashi says it means that she'll grow them out so that she appear grotesque.
Nice.
And
very good.
And the truth is that there is some dispute if that's what doing her nails means. There are opinions that it means to cut the nails, but the intent is the same. In other words, whether it means to grow it out or to cut it, either way, it's to make her appear less attractive. That is the idea. Now we should begin with some context, because
sure.
You launched into the question, but I don't know if everybody who's listening knows what's happening in the section of Torah you're asking about.
Okay.
So you might want to say something about that.
The floor is yours. Take it away.
So this week's portion starts out with a description of when you go to war and you take captives from the enemy, you may see among the captives of the enemy a beautiful woman, and you may have a desire for her. So in that case, what should a person do? So it seems like a strange question. It seems almost obvious that the answer should be, well, you should do nothing, because you should control your desire, and that's that. Now, the reality is, when you look around at the world, you see that unfortunately atrocities are committed in war, and men do take advantage of women at wartime, and it's very tragic, and it's very unfortunate, and it's very terrible thing. And here we find that almost the Torah seems to take for granted that the soldiers in the army of Israel, when they're encountering an enemy and have female captives, are going to have the same temptations. It's a very human thing. So what you would expect to happen right away is the Torah says, don't go near her, don't touch her, don't have anything to do with her. But it says the next words are, after in verse 11, after it says, and you will desire her, it says, and you will take her for a wife. But listen to the language of the Torah. It doesn't say, and you're permitted to take advantage of her, you're permitted to do anything you want with her, God forbid. Rather, it says, oh, you have a desire for a woman? Don't even think about it unless you're willing to commit to make this woman your wife. In other words, this type of relationship between a man and a woman requires a complete commitment. This is not a one and done. This is not a have a good time and then see you later. Totally inappropriate, right? So the Torah says you may take her as a wife. In other words, rather than say why doesn't the Torah just say totally forbidden? This is not how dating, how courtship works. You know what I mean? Like, don't even think about it. So there's some psychology here but we'll get into the answers first. Let's see what happens. So it says you may take her for a wife, and in verse 12 it says you will take her into your home, and you will shave her head, and you will do her nails, which we said could be to grow out her nails, to cut off her nails, whatever it is, but reduce the beautiful quality of her nails and the beautiful quality of her hair by removing the hair. And then it also says that you will remove the garment of her captivity from upon her. Now, here's the thing. So it's a little strange to hear, maybe with our modern sensibility, maybe with our American sensibility, and I don't know how it is all around the world, but there's this idea that sometimes this is certainly implied in the Torah, especially with the war with the Midianites that we covered a few weeks back, and the Midianites who were tempting the men of Israel. What somewhat implied is that the women would try to even seduce the soldiers, maybe as a way of allowing them to keep them alive, etc., rather than kill them. And so they would, when it says you will remove the clothing of her captivity, is because they would wear actually enticing, evocative clothing. And so you weren't allowed to look at her that way. So it says that she must remove the clothing, but it doesn't mean that she should be naked. It means she has to basically wear like a potato sack. You have to put her in a potato sack. She wears sackcloth. She looks terrible. You have to make her very unattractive. And it says she will sit in your house and cry for her father and her mother for 30 days. So why? There's a waiting period. It's 30 days, and she's crying, and she's miserable, and you have to see her in her misery. You know, like when you date, right? So what happens? The girl, she dresses herself up to kill, you know? She dresses herself up to look as attractive as possible. And then you date her, and you like her, and you get engaged, and during engagement, everybody's on their best behavior, right? And then you get married, and suddenly your wife lets you, become familiar with her own entourage. She's not wearing makeup. She's not doing her hair nice, whatever it is. It's true for the man also. He doesn't smell as good as he always made sure that he always smelled. Everybody lets themselves go a little bit physically, and then they don't behave as nicely as they did before. Not so polite, not so selfless chivalrous as each one was acting during the dating period when you're trying to get something. So then all of a sudden it's like, this is the real me, and then you start getting into fights with your spouse, and that's when the real marriage begins. But in other words, you're going to put her in her house, let her hang around for a while, you have to see the real her. So she's miserable and she's crying, so her mascara is all running down her cheeks. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but with the red eyes from crying and like bags under the eyes, she's going to look terrible. And that's how you're going to see her at her worst, right? And she's so angry at you. She's so nasty to you. Like, why do you want to keep this lady around? Anyway, keep her in your house for 30 days. Wearing a potato sack with her hair shaved and her nails, all decrepit and crying and looking terrible. And then it says, then you may approach her and consummate the relationship, and she shall be your wife. So before the Torah allows the man to actually be intimate with this beautiful woman that he saw among the captives, he has to go through this whole process with her. And so the questions are somewhat obvious, but okay. So the first and most obvious question, which we mentioned earlier, is why allow this at all? Just say she's totally forbidden. Don't look at her, nothing. And yet the Torah says, oh, you're interested in her, you desire her, here's what you got to do, right? And it gives you a whole recipe. So here the rabbis tell us an amazing statement. They say this statement. Listen to these words. In Hebrew, it's lo dibra Torah, ela keneged yetzahara, which means the Torah does not speak except opposite the evil inclination. And that is very akin to another statement in the Torah, and that is barasi yetzahara barasi Torah tavlin. That means God says, I created the evil inclination, and I created the Torah as a tavlin. Now, tavlin literally in Hebrew means a seasoning, a spice. I created the evil inclination, and I created the Torah as a seasoning. Now, the question is, shouldn't it be like I created the Yetzer Hara, and I created the Torah as its antidote? I created the Torah as its opposite. I created the Torah as its defense, shield, something against the evil inclination. It says, I created it as a seasoning. And what's the idea? It's a very, very big idea in Torah, is that we find that the way of the Torah, and I've said it before in this series, the way of the Torah is not to forbid. The way of the Torah is not to say, you cannot enjoy this world. And our rabbis tell us, God created a world, and he created a world full of pleasure. And he created a world full of pleasure for the purpose of us enjoying the world to its utmost. Now, the truth is that in order to enjoy the world to its utmost, we need to put limitations on things. Because if you indulge in any pleasure and any physical gratification too much, it ruins it. It really does. It ruins it. It's overkill, overdosing on drugs. I'm not even into underdosing on drugs. I'm against drugs altogether. But this idea of like the overdose, overkill, even in marriages suffer from what they call sexual burnout. When too much of a thing is permitted, then it becomes uninteresting and unenjoyable. So there has to be checks and balances. There has to be permitted ways and not permitted ways. There has to be ways that one can engage in the physical world in a pleasurable way, and then directives on where one has to hold back. And by taking this balanced approach, one enjoys things to their utmost. There's much, much more depth to this, of course, when we imbue spiritual meaning into our physical acts. We add a layer of pleasure that's beyond the physical, that's emotional, psychological, spiritual. We're tapping into deeper parts of our brain and our psyche to ignite deeper levels of pleasure than just surface. But people who just indulge without limit become sick of life. They become depressed. Like, this is empty. All these pleasures become totally empty. And I mean, anyone who knows what I'm talking about knows what I'm saying is 100% true. So here, so barasi Torah tavlin, that means I created an evil inclination, but I didn't create the Torah to say forbidden, 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 forbidden. I created the Torah as a seasoning. That means to show you how to temper those engagements with the physical world and physical pleasure and physical gratification in a way that enhances your life, that makes your life of a higher quality and not of a lower quality. And that requires balance. It requires limitations. Now, on the same token, when we come back to that phrase that said God created the Torah, this other statement that says, Lo dibra Torah ela keneged Yetzer Hara, that the Torah only speaks opposite the evil inclination. What that means is that there are some drives that are so powerful, that are so overwhelming, that if you would tell a person something is forbidden, they wouldn't be able to hear that. They would completely disregard it. And when a person goes to war and a person has to ignite that animalistic instinct within him to be very carnal and to go out and be rageful and fight and kill and awaken all the primal instincts that are in the animal form of man, and then he comes upon an attractive woman and his passions are awakened in that state, it would be, I don't want to say impossible, but it would be near impossible to tell a person, control yourself. And you don't even need to put yourself in such an extreme situation. But I'll give you a more mundane situation for anyone who's ever done fasting. Now, we Jews, we have fast days, so we know all about this. Muslims have fast days, so I'm sure they can relate to what I'm going to say. I don't know if Christians have fast days. Some people fast now because it's just a fad, like intermittent fasting, whatever.
When they fast now, it has to do. When Christians usually fast now, it's not because it's a fast day. It's because they want to. They're honestly, in all the time I've been Christian, I've known probably several dozen who've done a fast, and usually it's like a 3-day fast or a 30-day fast, something really extreme. And my impression of them all, and this has been in different churches, so it's not like it was just the mindset of one church. It really kind of pushed off the mindset that they were trying to be holier than the next guy. I don't know. That was the impression I got. One of them talked me into fasting. Two, some of them do it but the ones who do it for right reasons don't usually tell anybody that they're fasting, because in the New Testament, it criticizes, you should wash your face and look fresh. Don't look all down powdered like you're really doing this for, because you'll have your reward in here now. And so the ones who actually do it properly according to their thought is that if they're trying to fix something that's broken inside them, sin wise, or whatever they're trying to really reach out and connect with God, the stripping themselves, will remove the sense or make their senses more heightened for spiritual reasons and things like that. So, but I've never really seen or been taught anybody doing a fast based on proper fast days. Anyway, it's just some insight.
Right. Yeah, no, so that I think that carries over also into some areas of Jewish thought, that if a person takes on a personal fast, there is such a thing. You don't brag about it. You don't go advertising it, because it sort of reverses the whole righteousness that you're trying to create for yourself by whatever you're trying to accomplish with the fast. And I'm not encouraging fasting, by the way, but there is some of that within our system that could be done. But I in agreement with what you said. So those who fast for any reason can relate to this. It's like, I'm so hungry. Like, until you're fasting, you're not hungry, right? Until you're fast, you're like. So we like eat before a fast day because you want to not struggle to fast. So you're like eating up until the fast, and you're like, oh, I'm so full, I'm stuffed, whatever. And then all of a sudden, like, the fast begins, like, you can't eat now. Fast has begun. And you're like, I'm so thirsty. All of a sudden, when something becomes forbidden, it's like, I want it now, right? And all day long you're fasting, you're like, oh, food, I just want, right? And all of a sudden, like, you're watching the clock all day. How many more hours? When can I eat? And all of a sudden, oh, fast is over. And everyone goes, okay. Everyone coming to the table, I'll be there in a few minutes. When do you want to start eating? Oh, fine, I could do this for 3 more days. When you tell someone, it's allowed. No pressure. When something's not allowed, suddenly it's like, I want it. And when something becomes allowed, it's like, okay, I can have it anytime. Once I can have it anytime, it's not so urgent for me right now. Costco has a brilliant return policy. It's called return anytime. Return anytime. You know what happens when you have a return anytime policy? Nobody returns anything, because I can return it tomorrow. But when it's like 7-day return policy, 30-day return policy, you're looking at the receipt every day. Is it too late to return? I have to go return. And you go run and return the thing. But I can return it anytime. It sits in your garage for 5, 10, 15, 20 years till you give it to your kids as a wedding present. So when something becomes permitted, suddenly I'm not so interested in it anymore. It's like reverse psychology. Everybody knows that this way. No, you can't have it. No, please. Like, it's the reverse psychology. So even in Judaism, so there's a law that a man and a woman who are not married are not allowed to be alone together. Can't be alone together. What exactly the particulars are, what's called alone, how long is alone, not for this discussion, but the general concept. A man and woman who are not husband and wife or immediate family, let's say, should not be in seclusion together. Forbidden. So why? Because people have emotions and temptations, and we don't want things to happen, right? Now, a husband and wife are permitted to one another. They can be in seclusion, but people may know when a woman is having her period, a husband is not allowed to be intimate with her. Now, I ask you, during that period of time, are they not allowed to be in seclusion together? The man and woman, they always have to make sure there's a third person with them in the bedroom because they're alone together and it's forbidden to be intimate. And what if they, they're feeling their emotions overcome them? You got to have a third person in their bedroom? No, of course not. Why not? Why, when their husband and wife are forbidden from one another, is it suddenly it's fine for them to be alone? And the answer is there's a concept that the rabbis call pas basalo. Pas basalo means bread in the basket. There's bread in the basket. When there's bread in the basket, I'm not hungry. I'm not hungry now because there's bread in the basket. I can eat anytime. When my bread basket is empty and I look at my bread basket, I see it's empty, I feel like, oh, I'm so hungry. I wish I had a piece of bread. The bread goes in the basket. I'm fine. The bread's in the basket. So the idea that, okay, my wife is forbidden to me right now, but after a certain number of days, she becomes permitted again, and I can, resume with her regular interaction. So I'm not in a rush. I don't feel urged, right? So this is the concept of when something, as long as something has a permitted way, so that I'm not in a rush to do it in the forbidden way. So here, the Torah understood that in this situation of sort of carnal drives that awaken in a person when he's at war, that would drive him with such a desire towards his interaction with this woman he would encounter, that the Torah has to allow him a backdoor way to satisfy his desire so that he does not, so that he is able to say, I will not engage in the act of my desire now. I will wait until it's permitted because I have an avenue. If it would have said nothing doing, we would have had, unfortunately, some people would resist. Some people would resist and say, okay, I can't do it. But some people would say, I can't help myself. But if I say to that person, it's permitted, you just have to follow the following steps. He goes, oh, it's permitted? Okay, tell me what I have to do. Okay, first, you have to take her home, change her clothes, put her in something unattractive, shave her hair, cut her nails, sit for 30 days, let her cry, let her look awful, see the worst parts of her. And as he's doing all these things, which temper his desire, because he knows, oh, pas basalo, my bread's in the basket. I can have it later. I don't feel hungry now because I know I can have. He's able to channel that desire, and as he goes through this process, he comes to his senses. He's like, comes out of the war situation, takes her home, okay, all the hormones and all those carnal drives begin to, the adrenaline and everything else starts to drain out of his system. His intellect takes over again instead of his base emotions, and he sees her unattractive, and he's like, what am I doing? What am I thinking? Like, this is crazy. Lady, I'm sorry. I didn't mean anything. I don't want to do this with you, But it gives him the avenue that allows him to come to his senses. Okay. That is approach number one to this issue. Approach number two, and these are not mutually exclusive at all. Approach number two is to ask the question in an even more pronounced way. In last week's Parsha, if I'm not mistaken, in last week's Parsha, we had instructions for when the Jews go to war. William, am I still with you?
Yes, you are, loud and clear, and we haven't even had a hiccup.
Okay, I'm very grateful.
Very good.
We had the instructions when a Jew goes to war. There's 4 categories of exempt folks, right? I think Rabbi Komarnik might have spoken about this. There's the fellow who became betrothed. He needs to go home and be with his betrothed and marry her, and he doesn't go to war. He's exempt. The fellow who builds a house has to go home and enjoy his house before he goes to war. The fellow who plants a vineyard, he has to enjoy the fruit of his vineyard before he goes to war. And then it says, the one who is fearful. The one who is fearful. And our rabbis tell us it means, why is he fearful? In other words, here you have God's guarantee of protection. God's with you in war. So why is he fearful? He's fearful that he doesn't merit God's protection because of his sins. He's fearful because he knows that he is a sinner and he hasn't repented. And so he feels, if I go to war, this is how God's going to get me. So if you're fearful because of your sins, you should go home. And the rabbis tell us further, it means even for a minor sin. And the example of the minor sin, even someone who speaks between putting on the tefillin, the phylactery that goes on the arm, and the phylactery that goes on the head, you're supposed to put them on, one right after the other without interruption. And if someone would converse in between, which it's not so outlandish, you're going to synagogue, praying with a group of men, and everybody's putting their tefillin on. You want to say, did you see the game? Did you hear about what this politician did? But everybody has to keep hush because they're putting on the tefillin and you're not allowed to interrupt between the two. But it says, even such a minor sin that a person spoke between the two, he should be concerned. He should be concerned. Don't go to war. So I think Rabbi Kormonik spoke about this, that there was this like satire play that, if you did this sin, go home. And if you did that sin, go home. And so more and more people leave the battlefield till in the end. It's like two old men, whatever. And and he says, you know what? That's not so inaccurate a picture. In other words, what you were left with after go home if you're this, go home if you're that, was only the most righteous among the people. And the tzaddikim, the righteous rabbis, you had a bunch of rabbis that remained afterwards to go and fight the war. So you're telling me a bunch of rabbis are going out fighting a war, and this is the one the Torah says, if you see a beautiful woman in the spoils and you desire her, you shouldn't take her. Why are the rabbis getting so busy over here? Maybe someone like you or me, but the rabbis, the righteous, the most righteous people, no sins, the sinless people. We're talking about sinless people. The sinless people are the ones who are going to lust after women in war. So answer number one is, yeah, because we're human beings. No one is beyond. The one who's most at risk for sin is the one who thinks that he's not at risk for sin. Every person has to be on guard. It could be me. Every individual, every person has to understand I am susceptible to the evil inclination. And the Torah is just being real about it and saying, yeah, what, you think just because they're righteous means they don't have temptations? It's the opposite. The reason they're righteous is because they probably have a stronger temptation than anyone else, and yet they're overcoming it. These people are well aware of what temptation is. I'll give you there's a passage in the Talmud that talks about the end of days when God will destroy the evil inclination. Right? There'll come a time when we'll be purified to such a degree that the evil inclination will be no more. That is only a feature of the pre-redemption world when we have to struggle with free will. But at a certain point when we sort of pass the finish line, everything is idyllic after that, and there's no more sin. So at some point, it's depicted that the evil inclination will be slaughtered, as it were. And what's described is there'll be two groups of people. There'll be the righteous and there'll be the wicked. And they will see the destruction of the evil inclination, however that manifests itself, and they will cry. Each group will cry. The righteous will cry and the wicked will cry. The righteous will cry and they'll say, they're gonna see the evil inclination, this being which is also known as Satan or the archangel of Esau, however the different names for this force in the world, and they're gonna see it, and it's gonna appear to them as a mountain. They're going to see a mountain, and they're going to say, how is it that we were able to overcome this great mountain? and they'll be so overwhelmed with emotion that they're going to cry, presumably tears of joy, of just how did we overcome such a mountain, when they see what it is they overcame. And the wicked will see the evil inclination, and it'll appear to them as a thin cord, and they'll cry and say, how is it that we stumbled over such a small thin cord? And they'll cry over their fate, as it were, and what they did, what they chose. So a Rebbe of mine, Rabbi David Kaplan, he said, well, which one is it? Is it a mountain or is it a cord? Why did these see it this way and those see it that way? Now he has a brilliant treatment of this, where he says that every act of sin, when it comes to you as a temptation, this is very powerful, what I'm going to say right now. Every action that comes to you as a temptation comes to you with such force, with such magnitude, that it's like this giant thing, like a mountain. It's so overwhelming. It's just like, do the sin. This is what I want you to do. You must obey me. I am your lust. I am your passion. I am your temptation. And I'm grabbing you with your lapels, and I'm shaking you until you satisfy me. And then, but it's more than that. It paints this picture to us that this is going to be so enjoyable. This is going to be so satisfying. This is going to be so worth it. Until you do this, you're just missing out in life. Your life is terrible until you do this act. Can you see me? It just got dark in here. You able to see me?
Sorry, once I turn my microphone on, it takes a second for it to engage. You still look good.
Yeah, because there's an automatic light, and because I'm sitting still, more or less, it went off. So
No, you're
I'm
still
in a
fine.
dark room. There's sunlight, but whatever.
You're good.
So it's just, your life is terrible without this. You're suffering. You're miserable. You have to commit this sin, and that's what's going to enhance your life. You're missing out. It's so much to be gained over here, and so much to be lost by not doing it. And you're just like, oh, you're like suffering. Okay, give in. Not us. Somebody gives in. And then after the fact, you go, oh, that was a terrible, terrible choice. Can't believe what I did. I'm left feeling so empty and so awful, and so much inner emotional pain and turmoil. And it didn't deliver the promise. It promised me that my life would be better, and I would be happy, and I wouldn't regret it. And now I just wish I didn't do it. It wasn't worth it. What a right? The thing that appeared to you before is so difficult to resist in its grandeur. Afterwards is like, how could I? How could I? How could I? I can't believe I did that. It was so stupid. And it wasn't what I imagined it would be. And I wish I didn't do it. It was awful. So what is that? So my Rebbe said it's the power of our imagination versus reality. In imagination, everything is ideal, sublime, perfect. We imagine things being perfect. Our vacation is going to be picture perfect. It's going to go exactly like this. Point A, point B, point C. You have it all planned out, exactly what you're going to eat and where you're going to go and what it's going to look like and what it's going to feel like and how happy you're all going to be. And you're already picturing the postcards in your mind of you and your smiling family. And then you get there and you have a flat tire and this one's in a bad mood and you end up leaving late and you miss the thing and you're waiting in traffic and everybody's yelling and screaming and the food spoils. Or you have to eat potato chips at the gas station and then you go, no one even liked it, and there was a problem with the hotel, right? We don't imagine. If we would have imagined it that way, we never would have gone on the vacation, right? Let me tell you what's going to happen, right? And this is why my wife and I don't go on vacation. We're like, oh, wouldn't it be nice? We know we can't afford it, so we go, yeah, but when we get there, it's going to have this problem and that. Oh, yeah, it's not worth it, right? Yeah, when you get in touch with the reality, all of a sudden, right? So there's pre-sin and there's post-sin. Pre-sin is and post-sin is right? So the righteous. So here we go. Now, by the way, I said this in a class full of teenagers when I taught high school. Teenagers who were, let's say, not leading their best lives. Many of them busy on the street doing things you would certainly never want your child to do. And I remember explaining this concept to them. And exactly for the reason I told you before, when I said, the evil inclination, it tempts us, and we think it's going to be such a good experience, and we do it, and these are my words. I said, it's almost always never worth it. Now, why did I say almost? Because I know how argumentative teens are. So if I say it's never worth it, there would have been one smart guy in the class or 10 smart guys in the class who would have said, well, actually, there was one time I did it and it was definitely worth it. So I knew somebody would say it was definitely worth it. So I had to say it's all right. So that, again, I had to give the way out, just like with the captive woman. I have to give a way out so that nobody's in a rush to contradict me, right? If I said it was no, so then they would go, no, they would argue. So no, almost always I gave them the way out. And a guy argued with me. Anyway, listen to this. I said, it's almost always never worth it. This guy gets up in the class. This was like the biggest, baddest ringleader of them all, okay? Anybody who was striving to be a naughty boy, he was their hero. He was their role model. I want to be like this one. So he gets up and he says, you're wrong, Rabbi. It's always not worth it. Because I said almost always. And he got up and he said, no, Rabbi, you're wrong. It's always not worth it. He admitted it in front of the whole room that his lifestyle, which was just chasing one pleasure after another, one gratification after another, with no regard for right or wrong or consequences, was able to admit that he was simply a slave to his passions. And he was even in touch with himself to know that he's always left feeling worse than before he did the thing that was going to satisfy him. And he set me straight on. I knew that, but I said it not to set them off. And he said, no, Rabbi, always not worth it. Wow, can you imagine? Anyway, so now you have the righteous, and they're looking at the evil inclination. To them, it appears like a mountain because they never committed the sin. So for them, it was only ever in the imagination. They're still looking at the temptation to sin as this gargantuan thing that comes with so much grandeur, and they're resisting it. It still has that form for them. And they go, how could we have resisted this big mountain? How could we have overcome this great mountain? That's the language of the Talmud. But the wicked who've indulged and realized how flat and empty the experience was that they were seeking, they're on the other side of the sin, and they look back and they don't see that mountain anymore. They just see a thin cord. They see it for the nothing that it was, and they cry and say, how did we stumble over such a thin cord? Anyway, why did I say that? I said that because the righteous know what temptation is, maybe more than anybody else. The righteous know what temptation is. So the Torah deals with reality. The Torah deals with reality. When you go out to war, the sinless guys going out to war, there's temptation. The question of a sinless person, the question of a righteous person is not who's tempted and who's not tempted. If you think righteous people aren't tempted, you don't know what it is to be righteous. The difference between a righteous person and a not righteous person is, what do you do with the temptation? Where are you standing? Are you standing in front of the mountain, or have you tripped over the cord? That's all. That's all. The Torah is dealing with reality. Yeah, sinless people are going to war, and you're going to see a beautiful woman, and you're going to desire her. Okay? Now, if you follow my instructions, says the Torah, you can save yourself from calamity. Just follow the bouncing ball. This is what you need to do to get yourself out of this. And really, the goal is that he should just say, forget it. Now, ultimately, if he doesn't, though, he has to commit that she's going to be his wife. She has to be a wife to him, with all the obligations thereunto, not garbage. Now, the second approach, I don't know how many approaches I said, but there's another approach to this, which is more Kabbalistic. Comes more from the Hasidic teachings. This idea, I don't know how much I could go into it, but essentially this idea that there are these things called sparks of holiness. And the sparks of holiness have become scattered in the world in various places. And so to speak, the job of the Jew is to go through the world and uplift the sparks of holiness. And that's, that's part of the idea of sort of indulging in the pleasures of the world within the limitations that the Torah gives us. In other words, we have a godly channel to embrace everything in the world, is how we take the sparks that are hidden inside things in the world and uplift the sparks by, tempering this item with just the right formula. Like think of you get some type of you're mining and you get some type of a stone and you put it in the lab and you start pouring different chemicals on it until you refine it and it becomes this gem, right? So that's what we're doing. We're turning stones into gems by treating it with the formula that the Torah tells us exactly how we approach each area of life, whether it's intimacy, whether it's food, whether it's whatever. Relations between people, and this idea that some of those sparks became hidden into the souls of different people and they need to be uplifted. And there could be these sparks of holiness even within these women of the foreign nations that we're at war against. And what does it mean that you see a beautiful woman? That these righteous people are so in tune. They're like a magnet or a compass towards the sparks. They have this instinct inside of them where their internal programming is telling them, like a homing beacon, where the sparks are, and they're going to uplift those sparks. So it's only the righteous, sinless people who can detect in which individuals those sparks are. And when they see a woman who has this spark of holiness in her, to him she becomes irresistibly beautiful, because his soul is sort of seeing the holiness in her, and the soul is becoming attracted to her on a spiritual level, and she becomes irresistibly beautiful, and he desires her. So the Torah says, okay, let me tell you how to uplift the spark out of her. How do you take away the facade of externality, the facade of physicality, the facade of attachment to this world, and bring out the spiritual? Well, you have to shed all that physical stuff, and so you have to take her and you have to shave her hair and do her nails and put her in a potato sack and let her cry, and that's going to divest her of her attachment to physicality, and then you can join with her in an intimate way as husband and wife that'll uplift the spark within her. That specifically the attraction by the righteous to these women is on some type of a spiritual level, that they are detecting one of these holy sparks hidden in the darkness of this individual. Okay, that's another approach. Now, we're basically at the end of the hour, but we started a little late. So, I don't know, do we want to go a little more?
Sure, go ahead and finish up whatever you do.
So, okay, I think those are multiple, I think, digestible, acceptable approaches to why this section appears in the Torah and what we can gain from it, what we can learn from it. But here I want to point out one other thing. When it says in the final verse in the section, which is verse 14, it says, if you don't desire her, meaning after all those 30 days you decide, don't want her, change my mind, right? Which, according to at least some of the approaches that we said before, it's the dissuasion that was the whole point of this. And maybe the guy was fooling himself when he said, I see a spark of beauty in her, a spark of holiness. It's because of the spark of holiness that I'm attracted to her. Maybe he was fooling himself. So after he goes through this process, he realizes, no, not true. No spark. Go away. I don't want you. So if he doesn't want her, it says, V'shilachta l'nafsha, you send her free. You send her free. Umachar losim karena bakasef. You don't sell her for money. She's not your slave. She's not your property. You can't say, I don't want you as a wife, but you're my captive, so I'm going to make you my slave. I'm going to sell you. No, it doesn't say, if you don't want her, just make her a slave. No. Let her go. Don't even sell her to someone else. Losis amirba. Don't use her for labor. Tachasar Sheri Nisa, after you have caused her to suffer in this way, you let her go. Now, the sages point out when it says you will send her free, they say these words, "Velo lebeis aviha," but don't send her back to her nation. Lebeis avi means to her father's house. Don't send her back to her father's house, right? Send her lenavsha. That means literally means on her own. Nefesh is a soul. Nafsha, her soul. Send her to her soul. It's interesting language. Send her to her soul, meaning give her back to herself, her own freedom. But it doesn't say send her back where you got her from. Return to sender. You don't free her in such a way that she returns to her nation. And you know why? Because back at her nation, she was serving idols. And now you brought her into a Jewish home, and of course, you wouldn't be able to marry her if she was an idolater. So even though it was through force, you forced her to abandon her idolatry, and now she's been idolatry free for 30 days. She has an opportunity now to start a new life for herself without you, her abuser, but without idolatry. Don't send her back into the doom of idolatry that she came from. Free her into the freedom of now. So where's she going to go? It means she's going to live in Israel with the Jews. I'm not sure I think if you're going to marry her, she formally converts. But if you choose not to marry her, presumably she doesn't convert. That means as what's called a ger toshav, or what we would call today colloquially a Noahide. She's going to remain in Israel as a Noahide. And we find this in multiple places in this chapter, in this Parsha. As a matter of fact, which is something I wanted to address, is the appeal to the Noahides over here. Let her stay in Israel as a free person, idolatry free. You've given her the greatest gift. And you say, yeah, but it was forced. There was this, there was that. Okay, granted. But look later on in the Parsha. I'm just scrolling through to see if I can find the passage. But there's so much here. It's such a chock full of stuff, Parsha.
What verse is it?
I'm looking for it.
What reference?
It's this section of the prohibition to marry Moabites and other people. The people you're not allowed to marry.
Gotcha.
I mean, people that Israelites are not allowed to marry. Let's find the passage. Do you know where it is offhand? I'm scrolling.
Fixing to go for a shot in the wind here.
Okay, here it is.
Oh, you beat me. 23:3.
23. Yeah, good. In chapter 23, we have the forbidden marriages. You can't marry a person who has mutilated genitals. A person's not allowed to marry a mamzer, what's called a bastard. It's not the same as in English. In English, a bastard is someone born out of wedlock. That's more or less inconsequential in Judaism, meaning it's not permitted for a man and woman to engage in extramarital relations and have a child that way. I mean, if it happens, it happens. But there's very little stigma against the child born from a relationship between two people that would have been permitted to marry. If they would have been permitted to marry but had a child out of marriage, that child's not called a bastard in Torah. It's not called a mamzer. That child could be totally almost without stigma. I'm not going to go into what slight stigma there might be. It's not so relevant right now. But pretty much same as any other Jew. It's maybe lacking the sanctity of the union. That's all. Not too small a deal, not too big a deal. Now, a mamzer is someone who the two people who had this child were forbidden to be married on a very high level of forbiddenness. For example, a brother and sister, a married woman with a man who's not her husband, adultery, incest, that type of relationship. Basically, adultery or incest will produce a mamzer. But a forbidden relation, let's say like a divorcee and a Kohen, a priest not allowed to marry a divorcee. If they married and had a child, they did a sin, but the child doesn't have the sanctity of a Kohen. He can't serve as a Kohen. He loses that sanctity. But other than that, he's not a bastard. He functions normally as a Jew. So, but things that are forbidden on a high level of prohibition, such as adultery and incest, the child would be a bastard and is forbidden to marry any other Jew. Forever. They could marry another bastardess, I guess if there's such a word. A bastard can marry a bastardess, and they can have children. The children are still bastards forever. They will never lose that stigma, and they can never marry a person who's not of the same status as themselves. Very severe. It's very severe, the consequence of this relationship, this forbidden relationship. Now, another person who's forbidden is an Ammonite and a Moabite, and also an Ammonite or a Moabite can never marry into the Jewish people. There's an exception for females, which is too much of a subject to go into now. It could be a whole hour explaining that. But it's talking about the men. The men cannot marry, meaning if they convert to Judaism, they still are forbidden to marry a Jewish woman, right? Forbidden for all generations. That means they convert, their children are born, let's say they convert and marry, I don't know, who would they marry? Can they marry a Moabite convert who's a woman? Can a Moabite man convert marry a Moabite woman convert? I'm not sure. But let's say they did marry someone and they were forbidden to have a child. The status of Moabite would never leave them, and they could never marry into the Jewish people forever, it says. Never, ever, ever. No matter how many generations pass. But it talks about a Edomite or an Egyptian. An Edomite convert or an Egyptian convert cannot marry into the Jewish people. They can marry another Edomite or Egyptian, and then they have several generations of children. It says the third generation can marry into the Jewish people. The third generation can marry in. So why, right? So why? In other words, the commentaries ask the Egyptians and the Edomites, why can't they marry in to begin with? You know why? Because they were mean to us. You know, the Egyptians murdered us in Egypt, enslaved us for hundreds of years. You know, we don't so quickly accept them. The Edomites, they wouldn't allow us to enter their land, and they came out to greet us with a sword. They wanted to kill us. Oh, you want to kill us? You know, we're not going to let you in so easy. You can convert, but it'll take a few generations till we'll marry you. But the Moabite and the Ammonite, what did they do? So it says because they didn't greet you with bread and water when you came out of Egypt, and they paid the sorcerer Bilam to come and curse you, right? So that's worse. They can come in forever. That's worse than the Egyptians who enslaved you and killed you, and the Edomites who came out to greet you with the sword and wanted to make a war against you. This is worth it. They didn't bring you bread and water, and they hired Bilam to curse you. So we know what happened is that they wanted Bilam to curse us on a spiritual level, and they also, the Ammonites, they were part of the conspirators to have the Jews sin with the daughters of Moab and Midian, etc. So the commentators say that one who damages a person spiritually is treated more severely than the one who would damage a person physically. That the Egyptians and the Edomites who wanted to hurt us physically, they're only punished for 3 generations, stigmatized. But the Moabites and the Ammonites who were involved in harming us spiritually, that's the body is temporary, so the consequence is temporary. The soul is eternal, so the consequence is eternal. You see that the eternity of the soul, the consequence of the soul, is so great that even here, I'm bringing it back to the captive woman, that we removed her from idolatry. We don't allow her to go back to it, because that's a fate worse than death. It's a fate worse than death. Better to, so to speak, force her to remain, now that she's here, in the land of Israel, not serving idols, than allow her to return. Similarly, on this topic, and I have in my notes the citation, so I wanna bring it out, just so you see how much the Torah more or less emphasizes this explicitly, is in the chapter 23, verses 16 and 17. So let's take a look at that. It says, you shall not entrap the slave and in order to return him to his master, who will come to you to be saved from his master. Okay? Now the context is in the context of going out to war. So in going out to war, you might find defecting from across the border is going to be a slave from the other nation. He's going to run to you and say, save me from my master. He's coming to the Jews. And he says, save me. So the Torah says, if the slave comes from another nation, not from among the Jews, comes from another nation and says, save me from my master. What does it say in verse 17? He shall live with you in your midst, in the place that he shall choose, in one of your gates, which means in your cities, Batovla, wherever it's good for him. Lo tonenu, you may not oppress him. This slave comes across from another nation and asks for sanctuary among your people. You grant it to him, and you may not make him into a slave. You make him a free man, and he can live anywhere he chooses in the land of Israel. Now, the understanding is obviously without idolatry, because idolatry is forbidden in the land of Israel. And in the section that speaks about the Ger Toshav, the, so to speak, resident alien, which is what we call today a Noahide, living in the land of Israel, it means obviously keeping the Noahide commandments, and then the Jews are obligated to support them because they don't have an inheritance, so they don't necessarily have a livelihood. So we are commanded in the Torah to support them in their existence in our land. Now here comes a non-Jew. He obviously has to commit not to be an idolater, because the penalty for idolatry is a death penalty. That doesn't change. So if he's going to relinquish idolatry and say, I will be a Noahide, I'll be a Ger Toshav, you must accept him in your land. So, but it says you may not return him to his master. That's, I'm saying he may not. You could say, oh, you're someone else's property. We can't steal you from him. We have to return you from him. It says, don't do that. Don't do that. Now, Torah's not into stealing, right? Don't return him. You know why? Because you're returning him to idolatry. And here he's coming to the Jewish people. That means he's going to take upon himself to abandon idolatry and to serve Hashem. How could you turn a person away from that? So I look at these passages that says even a slave, that means even a person who, so to speak, is property of another person, you don't give him back and you don't keep him as property, you free him. So what if a free man would come? What if a person today, a non-Jew, would come to the Jews and say, please accept me among you, not as a Jew. I'm not coming to convert. That's a whole different story. I just want to live in one of your cities. It even says that the rabbis say that means you're not segregating him into his own city. He's living in a Jewish city. It says, I want to live with the Jews as a righteous non-Jew, as a Noahide, as a Ger Toshav. I want to live among you. He's not even a slave. He just could a Jew say, go back where you came from? Go back to, no, we don't want you? It seems to me from this week's Parsha that's totally forbidden. And I don't know if Jews are hearing my voice right now. And I'll be honest, I had very little time to prepare. I didn't look up the halacha. I didn't go into Maimonides. I didn't look in the codes of law how this is codified as law. So I'm not saying it's a matter of law that obviously is subject to the process of codification. But from the plain meaning in the verses here, it seems very clear that if a non-Jew, it's even going so far as to extend the example into even if he's a slave owned by another master, you don't return him. So certainly if he's not a slave, a non-Jew comes and says, I want to live among you as a righteous non-Jew, we should be embracing that person. And that, it pains me, unfortunately, the apathy in the Jewish community, that there's just not enough awareness. And it's not our fault. Now that I don't want to throw the Jews under the bus, God forbid. I'll make a little bit of an excuse. It's not our fault when you've been persecuted and genocided for hundreds or thousands of years by non-Jews. You're not going to be so prepared to open the door and say, come on in. We've learned to be very guarded, very close, and say, listen, you stay on your side, we'll stay on our side, we do what's good for us, you do what's good for you, you leave us alone, we'll leave you alone, let's all agree to let bygones be bygones. That's become the modus operandi of Jews for very good reasons. We have missionaries infiltrating like you wouldn't know, messianics coming with the kippah and tzitzis saying, I'm a Jew, and they come into our communities. So when a non-Jew comes and says, hey, Jews, I love you guys, I want to come and live with you, we're like, get out of here. We don't want what you're selling. We're very scared. we are very guarded. We are very paranoid. So it's totally justified. And the truth is, I'll be honest, we have to put our needs first. We can't risk letting someone come in and damage the infrastructure of our community the way that's been going on especially with Messianics and missionaries. So in a certain way, it's your own fault, people, not you personally, but we've had to become very protective, and it's come to a point that now sincere non-Jews, like many of you watching, don't feel embraced by the Jews, and I'm just apologizing, all I could do. And I think it's going to be a process of bringing awareness to the Jewish community of the needs of the no-hide community, and it's going to be a slow process, and there's going to have to be a way that we can guard ourselves from malicious, not well-intended infiltrators versus those who are sincere, and I hope that's something we can do. Anyway, I think that's a fine enough note to end on.
Okay.
To sum up, I think we offered some very rational, palatable approaches to the subject, the captive woman, and how the Torah, so to speak, permits a man to in a certain way take her in the way that we described, designed to dissuade one from committing an atrocity, and as well spoken a little bit about the concept of accepting the non-Jew in our midst who abandons idolatry, which is something that the Torah in this Parsha is clearly encouraging, and something that I hope is what we can look forward to in a healthy way in the future relations between the Jewish community and the Noahide community. And I've taken enough of your time, so we'll pause it there. William, have any follow-up questions? I'm open now.
Gotcha.
But, go ahead. I pass it to you.
Nope, that's good. That's good. It was a very nice as usual. You know, we always wonder, do we have enough content? Man, you can go for hours without even trying.
Telling William before the class, I said, I've been so busy working this week, I haven't really prepared. You know, I might be a little off the cuff, you know. And
well, you certainly couldn't tell.
Ask you about this week's Parsha. I said, ask away. So we had a class.
Good job. No, you certainly couldn't tell you weren't as prepared as you thought you were. That's for sure. Good job. Good job.
Well, I mean, you know, I've been studying it for a lot of years, so I have a lot in my back pocket. That's why I said to you, I don't mind questions, but sometimes if I don't have the script beforehand, you know, I'm always nervous.
Yep.
Am I going to get that question I don't know the answer to? Not that would be the worst thing. It's okay. It's okay to say I don't know. It's very important. Everyone hear what I'm saying? It's okay to say I don't know. It really is.
Right.
So,
very good. Okay, my friend. Well, thank you, Rabbi. You've had have a great night tonight, and thank you all for tuning in. This video will replay again in a few days once I get it fully edited and get everything all the bling popped in there, so you guys have plenty of visual references and such. So until a later time, see, today is Wednesday, tomorrow's Thursday, tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Rabbi Chaim Coffman for Controversial Issues. We'll see you guys soon, and shalom, shalom. Thank you. Appreciate it, guys.
Shalom, my dear
Take
friends.
care.
Hope this message finds you well. For the record, today's date is August 29th. I'm super excited about the way things are going. I'm running Tanakh Talk full-time now. Baruch Hashem. November will mark 8 years. It's hard to believe we've been around that long. I just finished creating the new schedule template, which will account for 3 shows a day, maybe even 4. This will be later on down the road, of course. Sundays, however, will only have 1 show. That is set aside for Rabbi Tovia Singer. Monday morning, 8:30, Rabbi Michael Skobac, and I will eventually fill that same time. 8:30, 9, 1 show in the morning, 3 shows in the afternoon/evening time. 3 p.m., 5 p.m., and 7 p.m. Central. If you like the way this channel is going, and the channel has been a blessing to you, please consider supporting the channel full-time by going to the website, tanakhtalk.com, TANACHTALK.com. Thank you once again for your time and for supporting Tanakh Talk. Shalom. Shalom, my dear friends.
חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד ויתור זו הגדולה, השאיפה והכמיהה.
אני אתה אתם תמיד תמיד כולם ביחד, חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד. איפוק זו העוצמה, ויתור זו הגדולה, השאיפה והכמיהה.
חושבים דוברים לובשים בכל האופנים, זה טבעם של אנשים שונים.
נזכור בסוף